At night in Bangkok, Thailand, a young woman is running in terror. The woman tries to flee from something until she reaches a dead end. She turns around and a terrifying creature begins to emerge from the ground. Hands immediately begin to grab her as the creature approaches and then ends her life, while screams echo through the alley. The next day we meet the couple Jim and Julie, who are on vacation in Thailand. Right away they meet a driver named Gogo, a kind man who offers to take them to the hotel. They arrive at the hotel and something catches Julie's attention. She approaches and sees some food and a little house on top and asks Gogo what those things are. Gogo explains that it's a spirit house and that the Thai make offerings to the spirits. He says it's to keep the ghosts happy, so they stay there and don't bother anyone. Gogo, besides being a driver, is also a local guide and offers to show the couple around the city. Jim checks into the hotel and the couple goes up to the room. While Julie is showering, she admires a gecko on the wall. The couple soon starts their tour with Gogo and everything is new to Julie, who takes pictures of everything. While Gogo shows the city and compares it to America, Julie sees something and asks him to stop. Julie reaches a place where we see more offerings and some strange things. She takes some photos. But one particular house catches her attention. The woman stares for a few seconds as if hypnotized. Just as she's about to take another photo, a woman suddenly appears and frightens Julie. She apologizes and quickly leaves the place. While Gogo is having lunch in the car, the couple struggles to order their meal in a restaurant. Then Jim surprises Julie by proposing. Without much hesitation, Julie accepts the proposal. That night, Gogo drops the couple at the hotel and warns that in the morning he will take them to a special place. He gives them a card with his number. At the hotel, a strange man starts talking to Jim and soon introduces himself as Robert, along with his friend Bill. Bill notices Julie's ring. She thanks him and says they just got engaged. Robert invites the couple to have a drink with them. Julie accepts, but Jim had other plans. Robert insists until he succeeds, and the group heads to a bar. While talking, Julie says Jim should learn more about the local culture. Jim mentions that Gogo told him about the legend of the ghosts, and Robert asks which ghosts he's talking about. Jim explains it's a local legend and says Julie is obsessed with those things. He continues explaining that Gogo told him that if a ghost can't find its home, it can possess the bodies of the living. Robert asks if he's trying to scare them. Jim laughs and says it's just local legend. Julie questions whether he really believes the story told by a guide. Then Robert invites them to go somewhere livelier. While walking, Jim drops his coins near some homeless people. At first, Jim is embarrassed to pick them up and leaves them, but the locals seem to dislike his attitude. Robert explains that locals believe dropping a coin is disrespectful and could cost you a finger, but the two laugh because they don't believe the legend. The two are getting along great while Bill and Julie come right behind talking. Bill asks when the big day will be, and she answers there's no date set, then asks whether the guy is married. As Bill is about to explain, Jim takes Julie to enjoy the tour, leaving Bill upset. While the new friends enter the nightclub to have fun, Bill stays outside with Julie. Hours later, Robert comes out and to make up to Julie for borrowing his partner, promises to take her to see a spirit house. But the place is inland, and Robert tries to convince Julie to go with them, saying it will be a once-in-a-lifetime chance. They head to the friend's car. There's something strange in this story, because Bill seems to like Julie and says she's a good person, and they shouldn't take her there. In the car, Julie discovers that Jim cheated on her at the nightclub and is upset. The group continues the trip, and Jim, who had been sleeping, wakes up surprised, saying it's not safe to travel with strangers. He wants to go back to rest, but Julie retorts that he partied all night and now it's her turn. After some hours on the road, the group finally arrives at the destination, and the two friends go ahead while the couple argues. While they argue about the betrayal, the accomplices are plotting something because Bill hands Julie's scarf to Robert. Julie returns the ring to Jim and then follows the friends. She is impressed with the place and asks what it is. Robert says it's a cemetery of spirit houses and that the natives fear destroying the site. He shows Julie one of the houses and she happily takes photos, not realizing Robert is offering her as an offering to a spirit. Robert proceeds naturally, shows a cursed object, and suggests Julie take it home. She initially refuses, but he insists, saying it's just trash and nobody will miss it. Not suspecting the men's malice, Julie ends up touching the cursed item. Jim tries to stop her, but it's too late. Robert and Bill run outside and Jim chases after them. Julie turns, asking if it's some kind of joke because that's her scarf, but she notices she's alone. A strong wind blows toward her, and she starts to look at the spirit house until she feels something and looks up. The young woman sees a creature on top of the little house and screams desperately, her cry echoing through the forest. Jim manages to catch up to the two, but they flee by car, and he hears Julie's scream. He runs to his beloved and finds her kneeling before the house. She says she doesn't feel well. A day has passed since the incident, and Gogo is waiting to take the couple for the rest of the tour. But they're still lost in that area. Julie is exhausted and asks to rest a bit. Jim can't get any signal at all. He tries to call Gogo, and Julie begins to hear noises coming from the forest, soon seeing something mounted on an elephant, becoming terrified. They manage to reach the road, but Julie hears many voices. Jim finally reaches Gogo. The driver arrives quickly but realizes what that place means and becomes suspicious. Jim wants to take Julie to a hospital, but Gogo warns it's dangerous to travel there at night, suggesting they head to his nearby home village. They arrive there and take Julie inside. Gogo's mother soon discovers the woman has been possessed, and, upon examining Julie's mouth, the woman sees an evil eye, which frightens everyone in the house. Gogo's mother tells him it's Watab, and the two women begin to pray for Julie. Gogo asks his brother to fetch help while he and Jim talk outside. Gogo tells Jim an old story. He says a rich man had an affair with his young maid, and the wife discovered everything and was so furious she set the house on fire, but the man and the maid escaped. The wife didn't have the same luck and burned to death, and Gogo says she is not a happy ghost, and that in Thai they call her Watabe. Jim asks what they have to do with that story, and Gogo says Watabe is furious because she doesn't like younger, prettier women. Jim says the woman is dead, but the guide counters saying she's still dangerous. Gogo explains that her house is exactly where he picked them up, and that Julie shouldn't have taken what wasn't hers, because now Watabe is coming after her. Jim doesn't have time to ask more, because the boys return with a monk. Jim is angry because he thought they had fetched a doctor, but Gogo asks him to trust him. Jim ignores Gogo's warnings and goes inside trying to stop things, but the natives don't listen. Gogo soon arrives to take the man, and Jim thinks it might be yellow fever or dengue, and with no other options, collapses sobbing. Gogo comforts him and says she will be fine because the monk is already taking care of her. The monk places some protective amulets on her and says prayers. Julie has a nightmare where Watab comes to get her, but she manages to protect herself with her amulets, and the spirit goes away. She soon wakes in the morning. The monk leaves, and Jim wakes to the noise and finds Julie much better and smiling. Before they leave, Jim notices Gogo is still hiding something from him because his family doesn't seem happy. Gogo lies and says they only asked him to call before next time, and as they leave, we see another spirit house in the region, and the villagers seem terrified, starting a kind of worship to try to calm the angry spirit. On the second day, Gogo drops them off at the hotel, and Jim thanks him for helping his beloved, but the guide still seems scared and leaves. Julie tells Jim she had a very strange dream where there was an angry, burned-faced woman. Jim asks her not to pay attention to ghost stories and moves on, but in the hallway he finds Julie's scarf. This infuriates him, and he runs to the room thinking the duo had stolen them. Jim wants to go to the police to file a complaint, but Julie says it's unnecessary and insists she wants her fiancé with her. Julie tries again with Jim and leaves her amulets on a dresser, and they make love. While the couple enjoys themselves, when Julie opens her eyes, she sees that creature again. She panics, gets up crying and goes to the bathroom, while Jim, worried, decides to go to reception to ask about the pharmacy. Jim arrives at reception and takes the opportunity to ask about the duo they met earlier, but the clerk says there's no one registered with those names, only 3 Brits who left that morning. Meanwhile, Julie relaxes in the bath until she begins to hear noises. At first, she ignores them, but the sounds grow louder and louder. Frightened, Julie gets out of the bath and decides to check her camera, laughing as she reviews some photos. However, when she reaches the images of the spirit house, she zooms in and notices something strange. She is inside the camera, and when she enlarges it further, she sees Watab over her shoulder. Fear takes hold of her, and at that moment, the hotel's power begins to fail. Disturbing voices echo through the place, and Julie grabs a flashlight to investigate. She runs into the corridor, which is completely dark, when suddenly the room door closes by itself, isolating her. Terrified, Julie calls for help but gets no answer. As she moves away, something passes quickly behind her. When she turns, she realizes she's no longer in the hotel, but in a strange, shadowy place. Walking through the scene, Julie finds a corridor lit by a strong light, and as she approaches, she sees everything in flames. She hears screams of agony, and amid the flames, Watab appears. Desperate, Julie runs while Jim arrives at the hotel and approaches the room. However, Julie remains lost in that mysterious place. Her flashlight fails, going out for a few seconds. When she relights it, she sees a figure sitting in a corner. When the creature raises its face to look at her, the flashlight goes out again, and on the next blink, the entity is already on top of her. Julie screams in panic, drawing the attention of the cleaning staff, who try to help her but are also terrified by the scene. Jim enters shortly after and sees his wife's condition, deciding to take her immediately to a hospital. At the hospital, Julie continues to see horrible things, screaming in terror while Jim tries to speak to the doctor. The doctor says that clinically Julie is fine, but reveals she had seen a similar case before. She explains that the patient who suffered from it recovered that very morning, and, upon mentioning that she was British, Jim connects the dots. Desperate, Jim asks to see his wife, who is now sedated and tied to the bed. He calls Gogo and asks him to come to the hospital. When the guide arrives, Jim convinces him to take him to the airport. Upon arrival, Jim asks Gogo to wait and begins searching for the Brits. He soon spots Bill on an escalator and runs after him until he finds the couple. Jim confronts Robert, accusing him of knowing how to get rid of the curse and demanding answers. Robert, sarcastic, denies knowing what he's talking about. Furious, Jim lunges at him, but is easily overpowered and falls to the ground exhausted. As he gets up, he tries to continue, but Bill intercepts him and explains that Robert did not do it willingly. Bill hands Jim a card and asks him to look for Reno, saying he should mention Bill sent him. Bill also warns that, at best, only 36 hours remain, urging Jim to hurry. Determined, Jim and Gogo arrive at the address. Jim, suspicious, asks if they're in the right place, and Gogo confirms. Going up the escalator, Gogo instructs him to knock on the door. Soon a man appears and asks what they want. Jim replies that Bill sent them, and the man immediately allows them in. They enter and find several strange things, including a woman singing. They walk until they reach a VIP room where they find Reno surrounded by people, and Jim says he came because of Bill. Reno and the rest are pleased to hear his name. Jim explains that the pair of friends did something to his wife, and that she's now in the hospital sick or supposedly possessed, which to Jim seems insane. Reno takes interest and asks everyone to leave, asking if Jim believes in the spirit world. Jim says he doesn't know how to answer, and Reno quickly replies that of course he doesn't know because in the United States, there aren't spirits here and there, while in that place, the spirit world is everything. Jim asks if he can help, and Reno says he'll have to be friendly and find another person to receive the curse. Otherwise, his beloved soul will be consumed. Jim says he doesn't want to do to someone else what they did to Julie, but Reno insists time is running out. At the hospital, Julie wakes and realizes she's tied and alone in a dark room, but soon notices Watab outside. The doorknob begins to move and Julie becomes desperate, screaming for them to leave as the knob rattles wildly. When it stops, Julie notices smoke seeping under the door that approaches and transforms into the terrifying creature that lies down on her. Julie begins to thrash in bed. Jim enters the room and quickly calls the doctors, who administer sedatives to calm her. Jim finds himself out of options and begins looking for a victim to pass the curse to. He finds a couple named Cal and Gwen, and following Reno's instructions, tries to persuade them kindly. Jim manages to convince them to go to the spirit house because Gwen is a big fan of the occult. However, realizing it's a mistake, Jim gives up and says goodbye to the couple, who are saddened by the news. Jim returns to the hospital to get Julie and decides to pick up some sedatives at the pharmacy before leaving. The two then decide to return to Reno, but Gogo warns it's a terrible idea. Jim says he knows the risk and prefers to continue. While the bouncer takes Jim to Reno's room, he knocks him from behind and steals his gun, heading to Reno. Jim asks if there's another way, but Reno says it's beyond his abilities and someone truly devoted will be needed to handle the curse, which will be very expensive. Jim says he doesn't care about the price and just asks Reno to take him to that person. Reno asks when Julie profaned the spirit house, and Jim replies it was exactly 2 days ago. Reno comments that he only has 2 days to free Julie from the spirit's hands, or she'll be taken to the abyss. On the 3rd day, they drive through a forest, and Julie gets worse and worse. Reno asks her to rest, but Jim orders him not to speak to her, pointing the gun. Reno calls him ridiculous and asks him to lower the weapon, which Julie does. Then Julie takes the gun, points it at herself, and begs him to shoot, saying it's the only way to get rid of the spirit. Jim refuses, saying he'll find another solution, but Julie gets angry, pushes Jim away, and calls him a coward. Once again, the old Watab appears, and Julie begins to become ill, so Jim quickly gives her the sedatives. Reno says he didn't know what Jim was facing, but is now determined to help the couple. Gogo, astonished, warns the group there's something ahead. When they look, they see a truck that crashed into a motorcycle, killing several people and blocking the road. The men get out to check the accident, but Julie wasn't fully sedated and gets up to look. As she watches, one of the covered bodies begins to rise and stare at her, and Julie hears someone banging on the car window. When she turns, she sees one of the boys who died in the crash. Terrified, Julie flees into the woods and no one notices her leaving. In the forest, she approaches a cemetery, and the creature soon appears behind her. The others hear Julie scream and run into the woods where she's about to have her soul taken. Jim reaches her and calls her name, but the woman catches fire for a brief moment. Reno, seeing everything, warns they are out of time and must hurry because the spirit is about to take Julie. They arrive at a cabin of an acquaintance of Reno, who quickly takes them to a healer. On the way, the boat stops suddenly, and Reno explains that even the locals won't go to that place because the waters are full of demons. While they try to start the engine, Julie wakes and sees someone emerging from the water and moving away from the shore. The figure reaches out to Julie, who is nearly pulled in, but they manage to start the motor. It becomes clear that was only Julie's dream, and they resume the journey. They finally arrive at an isolated place, and Jim carries his beloved inside. Reno warns the sun is about to rise and they're running out of time. He wishes them luck, but Jim pleads with him not to abandon them there. Inside, they find 3 shamans who say they cannot help because this is Julie's fault for disturbing Watabi's house. Jim pleads, explaining she was coerced, and the shamans agree to help. The head shaman says Julie needs to leave something important of hers. Jim removes the ring he gave her and gives it to the shaman. The woman says it's not enough and he must give a part of himself. Gogo explains Watabe needs blood and flesh and suggests Jim cut off a finger, but he tries to solve it with only the ring. With little resistance, the shaman agrees, and the exorcism begins, making the spirit act more strongly in Julie's body. During the process, the shaman sees all the bad things that afflict Julie and faints from exhaustion. The other 2 shamans are terrified, and when they turn, they realize Watabe is behind the men. They try to fight the spirit but are quickly defeated. Jim wants to get Julie out of there, but Gogo says they must remain in the circle. Gogo runs to get the knife, but the spirit grabs his foot. After much struggle, he frees himself and throws the knife to Jim. Without thinking, Jim cuts off a finger, and the unconscious shaman wakes up. Gogo places the finger in the shaman's hand, completing the ritual. Watabe, seeing what Jim did, tries to flee, but it's too late. The shaman finishes the exorcism and successfully expels the demon from Julie, who wakes as the old shaman laughs at the spirit. The trio leaves the place worried, thinking Reno abandoned them, but he was on the other side. The couple says goodbye to Gogo, thanking him for everything, and depart. Sometime later, we see that same couple from before in a cursed items shop. Gwen asks her husband to buy a spirit house and he agrees. However, when the camera focuses on the interior, we realize another evil spirit is there.